start, Annalisa, otherwise we're running late. So thanks for joining us for the last panel of this annual Level EEI conference. Today, at the final panel, we're going to turn things around a bit. And instead of just looking at finance and financing needs, we're going to look at very specific issues where clearly there is a financing need in society and there's an investment gap. We're going to be talking about concrete files such as the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, perhaps also the Mortgage Credit Directive, in the context of campaigns run by some of the organizations in the Level EEI consortium. My name is Joost Mulder. I'm the Director of Better Europe Public Affairs, a small consultancy here in Brussels advising civil society organizations on finance and many other topics. I'll introduce the speakers as we go along later on. Perhaps briefly to mention for those of you not following the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive closely, we understand that yesterday there was a final compromise deal struck inside the European Parliament on the basis of a Commission proposal from December last year. So that's relatively rapid in a year. We have an agreement inside the Parliament. The Council has also adopted a general approach on 28th October, which means that the negotiations between the institutions on this file are going to start in February, probably next year, the so-called trilogues. We're going to kick off the discussion with a video from MEP Seán Kelly. And let me briefly read some of his biography. He's the EPP shadow on the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive and has been an MEP for Ireland South since 2009. This is his third mandate. Is a leader of Fine Gael in the European Parliament and a member of the EPP group, member of the International Trade Committee, the Industry, Research and Energy Committee, and the Committee on Constitutional Affairs, and has led on important policy work, not just on energy performance of buildings, but also the General Data Protection Regulation, the 2030 target for renewable energy, the Invest EU program, and the EU-Singapore Free Trade Agreement. And with that, Anais, I hope you can launch the video. So it should be 7-8 minutes, I think. Well, it's an interesting short lesson in Irish. Thanks for that intervention. Before we move to the panel, two logistical messages. Unfortunately, Jourdan from the DG was announced in the program for INT Germany had to cancel his illness. He was going to talk about the challenges for banks and how ING tries to better understand the impact of energy performance on his mortgage portfolio. And I think the other speakers will try to complement for that. And then the second message is that Pierluca Menola on my extreme left is on the right is replacing his team leader Carlos Sanchez Rivero, who will be here either. With that, I'm happy to pass the floor to the first intervention, which is from Jourdan, the Executive Director of Positive Money Europe, a non-profit organization that leads democracy campaigns on the ECB, European Central Bank, and monetary policy. Seán, in his past, was a journalist and co-founded the Universal Basic Income movement in France as a platform campaigner, but now he's in advocacy. Seán, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Joost, for the introduction. Can we show the slides?
Anaïs, can you start presentation on because we're still on the holding slide. Yeah.
Was it me?
Yeah. Yeah. Microphone.
Okay, it doesn't seem to work.
The computer's all the way over there.
I need to point to something?
Yeah.
Did I can fire and someone? Okay, never mind. I think I'll just keep off. And if this doesn't work, I will signal to you. Okay, so thanks a lot for the invitation and for the introduction. In addition to my role as Executive Director at Positive Money Europe, today I'm also speaking on behalf of the Unlock campaign, which is a campaign that Positive Money has started, but which includes 19 organizations from France, Spain, Europe, Belgium, who work together to basically focus on how we can unlock financing, both private and public financing for the renovation wave of the EU. So I guess, and so I think what I'm going to do as the first speaker is try to give an outline of what proposal we're trying to put on the table. But I'm pretty sure that it's going to be just an overview, and other speakers will go in more depth. And a lot has been already said by Seán Kelly. So we all understand that we need massive financing, and yeah, public financing won't be enough. So we need to look at the role of banks, as Seán Kelly has said, and that's really I think a starting point for us, and that's why we're working on this issue as Positive Money Europe. Is that banks are already in the business of financing homes. So the financing of renovation is just an extra step for them and a natural thing for them to do to finance the needs of the real economy. And the key point as well is that banks have what Seán Kelly have said as this notion of elasticity. I like to describe it as, government budgets are constrained, while banks' budget, well, they don't really have a budget, they just create loans and they create money in that sense. And that's why the banks have this ability to respond to demand, perhaps in a more agile way than public funding do. That said, I think, as Seán Kelly has said, there are a number of, next slide, please. I don't know what to point to. So there are a number of obstacles for getting banks to lend to households for renovation. In fact, there's a survey, unfortunately you cannot read very well from the distance, but there's a survey from the commission survey a few years ago that showed that most people, 72% of the people, finance renovation from their own savings. So of course, if we were everyone to accumulate enough savings to renovate, I don't think we'll meet ever any target. And while only 18% of people take up loans. So here we can see the mismatch between what we need and the reality. And this is a major issue for people because, well, basically one of the major obstacles for renovation that has been outlined in a number of research surveys is that the upfront cost is a big issue. So you may get grants from your government, but if the grants arrive 8 months after you start the renovation, like is the case in France, for example, then you need to cover the cost, the upfront costs, before you actually benefit from the energy savings. So you have this delay, so the upfront cost is the problem. There is a mismatch. I think this is kind of consumer behavior problem here, because even though renovation can be profitable from a financial perspective after 20 years or 25 years, most households they do not invest with such a long time frame. Usually, normal households, normal families, they look at the next stage to make these kind of investment decisions. So we have a mismatch of horizon. And another issue is also the fact that, if you renovate, but then the next month, you're gonna have a big renovation loan to renovate, but then if the next month you have more monthly repayment on your loan, then you get energy savings from your lower energy bills, then it's also a major problem for people, and it's of course a psychological barrier. So, and the last point, I think, and I'll go more into that later, but there are banks do not currently offer the right products. So we come to that point later. Next slide, please. Okay. So those are the kind of 4 big proposals we try to put forward to fix that issue. I'm just going to run through them quickly, and then I'll zoom in on 3 of them. So first, it starts with establishing a mortgage portfolio standard, as Mr. Christian Kelly have said. And really, at the essence, the goal of the mortgage portfolio standard is to make sure that every bank internalize and integrate in their strategy energy efficiency consideration on mortgages. I'll go back to that. The second point is guarantee funds. Also, Mr. Kelly has outlined this. This is really crucial to make sure that loans are eligible to a wider group of people, including those who have a higher risk profile from the bank's perspective, namely pensioners or income people. Then I'll talk about renovation loans, which is an innovative proposal by Climate Strategy and Peter Sweetman, who may be known in this room. I'll explain more, and then the role of the ECB as well to make sure that the cost of funding for renovation is stable and low, and this is particularly important in the context where the ECB is currently raising interest rates and making any kind of investment more expensive. So okay, let's zoom in a bit on mortgage portfolio standard. So the idea, the definition that is actually being included now at this point of time in the EPB directive is that it's a mechanism that requires any mortgage lender, naming banks but not only banks, to define a path to increase the median energy performance of the portfolio of buildings. I don't know if someone could remove the windows on the screen. And as I said before, so the idea is that every bank will have to analyze their mortgage portfolio, look at for every mortgage, associate the mortgage with the EPC, the energy performance certificate of the underlying real estate property. And by analyzing the portfolio, then the idea is that banks will have to, just by doing that, they will see, what's the picture, how many of their clients actually would need renovation down the line, especially if we implement minimum energy performance standard as proposed in the EPBD. And thereby then the banks will have to have targets to improve the aggregate median energy performance at their portfolio level. And of course, that will induce them to think about what kind of products, what kind of marketing strategy they will have to put in place to speak to the customers, to offer them solutions, basically. So we're currently asking ask on the PPD directive and in the current negotiation is to have this mechanism as a voluntary, as a mandatory tool that all banks have to implement. And so the legislation has to do that, and we understand that the Parliament is asking for a delegated act to come forward with methodologies and targets to be harmonized. Okay, I would maybe, yeah, I'm gonna not go in order. Yeah, I would just add one argument for why this really matters for banks. So it's not just good for renovation. It's also a tool that is extremely important for banks because energy performance has become now a climate risk issue for banks. Why? Because basically mortgages that are associated with a real estate property, a house that is less energy performant, well, these loans are going to become increasingly more risky for banks. This is because basically the passoire énergétique, the very low energy performant buildings, they are basically usually owned by people who are more on the low income side, who are also facing higher energy bills. So with the current crisis, there's a fair risk, and this has been pointed out by the ECB, by the European Central Bank in the last stress test in July, that the risk for houses or mortgages within a house of a low EPC is 3 times higher than for an EPC that is A grade. So clearly there's a correlation between the risk and the EPC, and therefore it really then becomes a core issue for banks to anticipate this risk, to understand it, and to mitigate it by basically helping people to renovate so that they don't become a risky asset for the banks. So I think that was an important point to say. I put in my slide in the right order. Okay, so now I've talked about MPS, mortgage standard. So what kind of tools we want banks to develop? So there's been a very interesting report by Climate Strategy that we think illustrate very well the kind of products that we need. There are two key features in this proposal, and maybe before I explain the proposal, I think we have to realize that right now what most banks are offering when they, if you go to a website of your own bank and look for renovation loan and what products they offer, what you will find is usually consumer loans with a few years of maturity, with an interest rate of maybe 5, 6, 8%, maybe more by now with the rate increase by ECB. So we really have instruments that are not adequate for deep renovation. Okay, with this kind of loan, you're going to change your boiler, you're going to maybe change the glass windows and so on, but you're not going to do a deep renovation with roof insulation and so on. So we don't have the right products. So what would the right products look like? Well, two key criteria. They should be like a mortgage in the sense that the house operates as a collateral for the bank. So this should not be consumer loans. Having a mortgage-like loan, of course, means people take a bit of a risk because they pledge a house, but this also makes it lower cost for them. Typically, the cost for a mortgage is 3 or 4 times lower than a consumer loan. And of course, this also makes the banks a bit safer. So in the sense that this would remove some of the barriers on the bank side to renovate, to offer renovation loans. And the second and perhaps more radical proposal is that this should have a zero coupon structure. This means that instead of having monthly repayments, people would have the options to only repay the loan after 30 years, or when they sell the house, or when at succession, if eventually the person dies, and as an inheritance tax, if you like, to put it in a very illustrated way. And so the benefit of that is that basically you completely upfront the benefit of the renovation for people, because they immediately are going to see the energy efficiency gains in their bank account. The energy savings they're going to make will appear immediately, while of course the cost will be more delayed. And I think this really addresses some of the issues I pointed at the beginning. The cash flow problem and the upfront cost problem are not an issue anymore, basically, with this kind of loans. Of course, there should be an option for people to do early repayments if they want to. But this would be a way for many people to afford renovation right now. And then, yeah, I'm going to finish by talking a bit more about the role of the ECB. So, as I said before, right now the ECB is increasing interest rate. They're probably going to do another rate increase tomorrow. And what this does is it makes all kinds of investment more expensive. But a major point here is that green investment in general, renewable investment, are disproportionately affected by this type of increase of rates, because renewable investment are more sensitive to the cost of capital than, say, fossil fuels. When there was a study by the International Energy Agency that showed that 200 basis points more of capital cost increases energy price down the line by 20 times. So the effect is bigger for energy, for green energy type of investment. So what is really important for us is that we need to ensure a low and stable cost of funding for these renovation loans. And so how it would work is that every time a commercial banks offers a renovation loan to the type of what I described before, but other types of loan as well, well, then the ECB would allow banks to refinance themselves at a lower rate. So currently the ECB's rate is going to be 2% tomorrow. We could maybe say, okay, the rate is going to be 0.5 guaranteed over the next 10 years. And so banks have really no doubt that these kind of loans are going to be profitable for them, but also this will allow them to push down the cost of these loans for consumers, which is the goal. And a last point on this would be to say that energy efficiency, why should the European Central Bank do this? I mean, of course, we would hope that they think it's a good idea, but they also have their mandate, their primary mandate of price stability. And actually, it matters for them because energy efficiency, in our view, On the medium term, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in the next 2 months, but on the long term, energy efficiency are deflationary investments. Because the less we consume energy from imported energy from fossil fuels, from Russia and so on, the more we produce energy domestically and the less we consume energy as such, then the less the energy component of inflation will be, the more it will be reduced. And right now, energy is the main driver of inflation. So in a way, if the ECB doesn't promote energy efficiency and the green transition as a whole, then what will happen is that the ECB will have to face an environment where we're going to have more volatility in energy markets and higher inflation from energy in the next decade. So I think the ECB has a vested interest in supporting a successful transition, and that's why we think they should reconsider this idea. The reason why the ECB has not done that, has not done this proposal last year because it considered it, was because it lacked data from banks about which kind of loans could be eligible for this green discount rate. But the good news is next year the taxonomy will be in place. Banks will start reporting on renovation loans, on the volume of renovation loans in their loan book. So all this data issue is going to be solved, and we really think now is the time for them to reconsider it. So I stop there, and just to say, if you want to know more about the campaign and join our impressive number of partners, you're most welcome to check out our website, Unlock the Green, and look forward to the remarks and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stan, for this technical financial market perspective to the European Renovation Loan and Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. The two next panelists will look at different perspectives to the directive. We'll start with the environmental perspective, and then we'll go to the consumer impact, and then finally a reaction from the Commission before we move to the audience and the online polls. So the environmental perspective will come from Mathilde Nonnon, Sustainable Finance Policy Assistant at WWF's European Policy Office, working on issues related to retail banking, consumer credit, and mortgage credits for energy efficiency improvements. Before joining WWF, Mathilde was involved in several other NGOs in the environmental and human rights field, and she holds a Master in European Law from Maastricht University. Mathilde, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joost.
Yep.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here today and to be able to present some of our key conclusions and recommendations on how to finance the EU renovation wave. As we know, we're facing a true climate emergency, and we are very far from being on track with a 1.5-degree pathway. At the same time, Europe is facing historic and defining geopolitical challenges and a woeful energy crisis. As we said, citizens and companies are struggling to pay their energy bills, and this can translate into real credit risk for banks and even into a wider risk for the stability of our entire financial system. In other words, it's everyone's problem. And the EU committed to reach clear climate and energy targets by 2030. Now we can't just rely on good intentions. What we need are real fiscal and regulatory solutions to address the heart of the problem. Because ultimately everything is linked. The climate and energy crises are linked to our high dependency on fossil fuels, which is due to our high consumption of energy coming from the building sector, 40%, and which relies on fossil fuels. So this is where you see the heart of the problem. Our building stock energy efficiency, or rather inefficiency. So we must address the heart of the problem, or we'll never meet the targets that we set. And so today I will focus on two key points. First of all, why we need to mobilize the private sector through mandatory MPS, and secondly, why we need to make sure that public finance goes towards the deep renovation of the worst performing buildings and not fossil fuels. So starting with the first point, as we said, the renovation challenge is huge and the public sector alone cannot finance it. We need to mobilize the private sector. And that's why we agreed that banks have a key role to play here. Because, the ECB itself said that bank loans should cover around 214 billion of the financing needed for building renovations. And we know that banks have a unique position to engage with homeowners and to influence them through their mortgage relationships. So this is why we welcome MPS, because they will allow the mobilization of these banks and create new incentives for them to work with their clients to renovate. But to be truly impactful, it is essential that MPS are well designed and that it is clear that banks must set mandatory targets. Because we were supposed to hear about ING, and the Dutch bank ABN AMRO also has put in place voluntary MPS. But we know that relying on the voluntarism of banks will take too long and it won't be ambitious enough. Legislative action is the only solution. And of course, if you decision makers believe that it is too soon to introduce such measures upon the entry into force of the EPBD, it will still be acceptable to sequence the implementation of the targets in the MPS to give a bit more time to banks to adapt their lending strategies and to understand how to combine this with public support schemes. Finally, what we support also with regards to MPS is for the Commission to adopt a delegated act to establish a common methodology for banks to set the targets, to provide clarity and legal certainty, and to put in place the right social safeguards. So MPS will be a great tool to incentivize mortgage lenders to play their role in the green transition. But of course, coming to my second point, the public sector also has its key role to play. And we know that public money is limited. So we must target it where it is really most necessary, where the private sector cannot play a part or simply needs a little push. So what does this mean? This means that public funding should go towards the worst performing buildings of class E, F, and G. Why? Well, first of all, because that's where people most affected by energy poverty and vulnerable households live. They need the money the most. They won't be able to renovate without financial help. And second, because by focusing on E, F, and G, you would have the biggest energy efficiency gains. Public funding should also be targeted towards deep renovations or renovations that reach at least class C in as few steps as possible. Because you can see from this study from ADEME, ADEME, the French Environmental Agency, that partial renovations are neither cost effective nor energy effective. You can see that it's possible to achieve a low energy renovation in 1 or 2 steps, but the energy consumption will increase by plus 30% if it's done in 3 or 4 steps, and plus 50% if it's done in 5 or 6 steps. So we must target public money towards the deep renovation of the worst performing buildings. And of course, we should take revenue-based parameters into account as well to ensure that vulnerable households are prioritized. Finally, what is also key with regards to public funding is to make sure that we don't waste it on fossil fuels. Because we said we need to address the heart of the problem. And we know that fossil fuels are not affordable, they're volatile, and this is disastrous for EU economy. Plus, by giving subsidies for fossil fuels, we actually risk locking households in costly gas-fired boilers and stranded assets. Whereas we should, on the contrary, provide them long-term solutions. And we also know that in 2024, at least 10 member states will have enforced a national ban on either oil or gas heating systems. So logically, ending subsidies for such boilers should be achieved as soon as possible. And money should instead be channeled to directly support smart electrification, efficient heat pumps, solar thermal, etc. Okay, so just to quickly conclude, with well-designed and implemented MPS, coupled with targeted public support, we really think we can make a difference. Of course, you have many other factors and instruments to take into account, but we can keep that for the open discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Mathilde, for this efficient presentation and providing the environmental perspective and for insisting indeed why, as MEP Seán Kelly mentioned, there are certain classes of buildings that should be privileged when it comes to financing renovations. Next up is Anna Martin, Financial Services Officer for BEUC, the European Consumer Organization, in charge of retail banking, consumer credits and mortgage credits with a specific focus on this topic, green loans. And before joining the Consumer Association BEUC, she worked in for the German Foreign Office in a team coordinating the German EU Council presidency. Anna, go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes. So yeah, we heard a lot in terms of very technical instruments. How do we get there? What we need in terms of funding? That's very interesting. And there, I mean, I mostly agree with the previous speakers. But let's get perhaps back to the basic consumer questions. What makes what drives the decision of a consumer to say, yes, I will renovate my house, or no, it's too expensive, it's too much administrative hassle, and these kind of questions. So first of all, the first question which comes to my mind is, does it make economic sense for myself to do that? Because let's face the truth, you have to undergo quite a highly administrative process. You have to do grant applications also on. So that's sort of the first question. So, and that's why we need also financial instruments, because if we don't have financial support for consumers, we often end up in a situation where we have long payback periods, or it does not make sense because if you take a normal consumer credit, you pay 10% interest rate, and that adds up on a very high, expensive renovation costs at the beginning. So the first question is really, does it make economic sense, and how can we drive as policymakers this question, or how can policymakers drive this question in terms of, yes, it makes economic sense. So that's the first question we need to answer. Second question is the financial instrument which is at hand adapted to my situation? If I'm a low-income consumer who barely makes ends meet, I don't have the financial capacity to get a normal consumer credit, because every banker, and rightly so, will tell me, look, your financial situation is that you have a few euros left at the end of the month. I cannot give you a credit. So for these kind of consumers, we need subsidies because they simply won't get the credit. So if we want to have them part of the renovation wave, we need publicly funded instruments, and they should be targeted to these consumer groups. And then third element, which I would, or third question is, what are the efforts involved in getting to this financial instrument? Do I need a master in grant applications to be able to fill in these forms? Or can I do that? Or even better, do I have somebody helping me, like a one-stop shop where I can go and just flag my situation, and then I have somebody who has perhaps a really professional experience in grant applications and can easily help me to drive me through the process in a smooth way. And perhaps last but not least, the question, when does the money arrive? Because if the money arrives and I have already had the obligation to pay all the renovation costs to the installer, well, if I don't have the money, then this renovation will just simply not come true. So there are a lot of really basic questions which we need to think at first when we design financial instruments. And we have discussed that a lot also among ourselves in terms of what we need. And so it comes to probably no surprise that we have come to quite similar solutions, but perhaps flagging them also still a bit from the consumer perspective. So as I said, I mean, there are green loans, but there are also subsidies. So we need to target these kind of supports to different consumer groups. We see green loans rather an instrument for middle or higher income consumers who need to top up capital, which they anyway have. And these types of loans have to come with attractive interest rates, because if we have very high interest rates, this quite shaky balance of economic sense is getting negative if you have to top up by 10% interest rate. Second point is that we need for low-income consumers subsidies, otherwise they will simply not be part of the renovation wave. Then what we also have heard from the speech from Kelly is these guarantee funds. What do we mean by this? We would like to see risk mitigation, meaning that if you are if the banker is not 100% sure that he will pay back the loan, we can add sort of guarantee funds to make sure that the money is actually lent to consumers. So the guarantee fund can step in if there is a default from a consumer. That's interesting, for instance, for elderly consumers who sometimes have a lot of capital but they have a lot of other risks. I mean, from a creditor perspective, there is fears that lending money to these consumers, I mean, you could have illnesses that could be, I mean, worst case scenarios basically when you're an elderly consumer, which ends up in a situation where often elderly consumers don't get credits. But if you have, for instance, guarantees funds, public guarantees funds, elderly consumers could renovate, and those are the ones who perhaps, age 50, 60, you're entering retirement, but you're still fit, and you have the time to do such a process. So that's the kind of idea behind these guarantee funds. And then also the revolving funds, which bridges the time gaps until the subsidies arrives, meaning that of course sometimes a public entity wants first to see the result before they grant the money, which makes sense from their side. But for the consumer, that means that you have to bridge a time gap where the installer will already tell you you have to pay the bill until next week, Wednesday, and but the subsidy arrives 2 months later. So we need funds which bridge this gap until the subsidy arrives. And then very important also, we have a consumer organization, is sound consumer protection. And that's really the prerequisite for all these financial instruments, is that you don't push people into over-indebtedness so that they take part in the renovation wave. That doesn't make sense, and we will lose in the long term because people get unhappy to be over-indebted but live in a house which is A-level. I mean, that we need to have sound creditworthiness checks. If a consumer doesn't get the credit, then we need subsidy solution as a fallback there. And we also need credit products which are attractive. We see, for instance, in Portugal, we have a system where there are cost caps for sustainable loans. So they are cheaper, actually more attractive than traditional loans. And we would like to see that also in other markets. So that's in a nutshell, the consumer perspective.
Thanks a lot, Anna, also for being brief. With that, I think the burden is now on the representative of the European Commission to reflect on all these different aspects of mortgage portfolio standards and the energy performance of buildings directive. I think, as Seán Kelly said, MPS are one of the tools in the toolbox, but we should go towards a comprehensive set of measures. So on the panel, we have Pierluca Merola, Policy Officer in the Energy Efficiency Unit of the Director General for Energy of the European Commission, in charge of the financing provisions in the recast of the Energy Efficiency Directive and the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. Background as a consultant in EU affairs and an academic assistant at the College of Europe, where you also did one of your masters, I think. Pierluca, the floor is yours. I hope I don't give you too much of an expectation to deliver on.
So I will not be able to deliver on that, but I will try for that. I don't know if it works.
Yeah.
When it's up to work, okay. Yes, I will try to address many of the points that you raised, but of course, I mean, as you know, the negotiations are ongoing. We heard there was an agreement in the Parliament. As you know, in the Council we have already the general approach. The agreement in the Parliament still not official, because we are waiting for the voting on the ITRE committee, but that's what we heard as well, that this will come soon. So I wanted to, I mean, from our side, we will not probably repeat what you already know, but we wanted a bit to set the scene of what how do we see the challenge ahead, and also to give a bit of figures and number. This might be a bit repetition from your previous exchange, and then I will touch upon some of the elements. What is key, and you know already why we're speaking about this today, is that the residential sector has been identified as a clear priority to deliver on the climate target, on the 55%. There was the climate target plan is basically the impact assessment that the Commission have done in order to identify the sector that where the contribution will need to be increased to be able to achieve the European climate law. The European climate law that is not under discussion has been endorsed by the member state. This law is in the legislative framework, so we have already committed toward that. And the majority of the greenhouse gas emission at this stage come from buildings. So that there is clearly where we need to intervene. In order to address this need, first the Commission have come forward with a communication and a plan, the renovation wave, which is what it is. I mean, an action plan with at least a number of initiatives. One of the initiatives, the most important one, is of course the revision of the energy performance of building directive. The objective of the revision of the VPD are two. On one side, to give a strong acceleration to the renovation of building toward 2030, and the other side also to give a long-term trajectory and horizon to what our building stock will need to look like in 2050, where the European Union have committed to become climate neutral. We are speaking today about financing. I think it's important to recall where we are in terms of EU budget and what are the financing available, because this also gives us the perspective of what can be done and where we need also maybe to intervene in the next year when we speak about financial resources and a multi-annual financial framework. The budget has significantly, the financing need in line with the increase in ambition have increased, but also the budget have increased compared to the previous financing periods. We had the 4 times more funding available for building renovation and energy efficiency in the financing period. This is on a certain way particularly linked to the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which have represented a strong injection of capitals, of public capitals, that the Commission went to the markets and borrowed capital to deliver on the recovery. When we speak about needs, if I'm not wrong, we are speaking between, depending on if we are looking at the EED impact assessment of the PPD impact assessment, but in terms of additional need, we look at around 160 billion per year from 2020 to 2030. So we're speaking about above 1.6 or 1.5 trillion of additional investment, of course, not of total. And when we look at what are the programs available at the EU level, I mean, there is a number of them. There is program for direct investment. These are often based on shared management, so with a strong role of the member state and of member state authorities in designing their own financing program. I wanted to underline this element because after when we will pass from the negotiation that are currently ongoing to the implementation, we need clearly to look at all the actors that are involved in setting up, for example, EU guarantee or public guarantee to the risk building renovation investment, as these are often we have always advised, of course, to member state to set up financial instrument with the fund that they have available. But also, I think it's important to look at what we do at the EU level, and is indeed to support the mobilization of investment, in particular via InvestEU, which is an EU guarantee. It's not only for buildings, of course, but it's wider, but it's indeed a EU guarantee. And with a number of other program and advisory service, such the ELENA facility or the Life Clean Energy Transition sub-program. Now I wanted just to go off to a bit, it's a bit small, the slide, so I will go, hopefully you can see it, but I will go a bit in memory. It is clear that when we speak about the needs, we are in how much funding will come from public budget and how much will need to come from private resources. We can clearly say that the public budget alone can cover just between 10 and 20% of the total investment need. This means that every kind of public budget resources have to be used on a cost-effective way, and I mean, Mr. Kelly clearly underlined it in his introduction, in order to mobilize private investment. How to do so? There is a number of actions that need to be taken, and I mean, we are not starting today. We are not starting with APBD, but clearly, when we speak about mortgage portfolio standards and the role of financial intermediaries, there is a dialogue ongoing with financial institutions that need to be strengthened and probably go toward the need to establish clear commitment in terms of financing of sustainable finance in general term, when we look at the taxonomy, but in general also in terms of clear support to partner the ambition in the PPD that come from the PPD, but also from the ED. There is a role to take into account in terms of innovative financing. I heard in the different intervention, of course, like the links that was established between mortgage and consumer loan, the higher risk for consumer loans. There are other ways to finance building renovation. There are in energy performance contracting. There are on tax and on bill financing. I mean, we should also look at new way, because indeed we stumble in the end of the day when we look at mortgages only, we always end up asking, trying to find way to basically for consumers to put their house as a collateral to basically implement a possible obligation that will come from the EU legislation. So this is for those that are willing to do so, it's important to give them the tool available, but it's important also to develop tools that take into account consumer wishes and are not perceived as an invite for consumer to put their own asset as a security. Consumer loans, we have clearly an issue there, but that hopefully we would like to address through in order to lower the interest rates. Then what is important, it was addressed in terms of technical assistance, one-stop shop, is the role that these facilities have, because the one of the aspects that is often underdeveloped when we look at the energy efficiency compared to energy efficiency building renovation investment compared to large scale investment, that these are smaller investments, and we need to aggregate this investment to create an interest in the financial sector, in the financial institution, in order to develop them. And I mean, this kind of facility that not only help the consumer to develop the investment, but allow a strong pipeline of projects, so that the interest from the financial institution is increased, and while of course the demand for more building renovation will come from the regulatory framework, from the BBD, from the introduction of new regulatory framework, but we need also to make it on a certain way, make it more interesting to aggregate this smaller type of investment compared to, I mean, big infrastructural project. In the end, when we speak about sustainable finance, that is the level of competition we are speaking about about here. I mean, 10,000 building renovation against the development of a new railway, and the objective is the same, is the climate objective in the end. So, and then one last element I wanted to underline, that was related, I mean, to the intervention, I think, of Anne on consumer protection. I think this is key, but it's covered a bit more in the different investment. We know that investing for the financial institution, for the financial sector, real estate investments in general are a safe investment. They always have been, because there is an asset. Energy efficiency, any kind of investment in line with our climate objective, is even safer, because it put the bank on a trajectory, and that's what we are discussing today, toward climate neutrality. And what we need to do is indeed to build on this high reputation of this kind of financial product. I mean, speak financial product, speak dedicated renovation loan, dedicated energy efficiency loan, mortgages. We need to build on that and try to pay attention to not, because in the moment we, I understand we have an urgency, but we also need to think properly about the instrument, because in the moment we open to some reputational risk for energy efficiency mortgages, for example, we risk to damage the whole value chain. I'm reflecting about that because sometimes we hear that for example, the creditworthiness assessment is something that get on the way to finance more renovation, or we should. Or as we have heard before, like we still need to look into the detail of ideas related to the renovation loan. But I mean, zero coupon structure and late repayment based that can be accessed by the banks once a succession happen or in 30 years. This also can entail some additional risk compared to what we're looking at today. But also in the same level, this kind of risk should be mitigated by public guarantee that could be provided at the EU level, could be provided at national level, and we should really work with all the actors involved in order to de-risk building renovation investment. I'm open. I don't know. I touched some of the points that were brought up, but if there are other things that I can reply, I will come back to it.
Thank you. No, I think it was an impressive first tour de table from everyone here. And I realize it's 24 degrees in here, so either we're in a super isolated building or the heating has been on quite well. So to wake you all up a bit, I would propose that we do a short poll on Mentimeter. You can see the access details there. I would ask Anais to post them again in the Zoom chat. So it's menti.com, and then the access code is 75484959. 75484959. And take a few minutes to fill out the poll, and then that gives us also some ammunition to respond to here on the panel. Have you filled it in? No phone. Yeah. And also, meanwhile, if any questions have come up, we'll combine this with a Q&A for the next 25 minutes. I want to do it. I have to advance them. Okay. I can flip through them one by one, right? To show the results. Yeah. So but you can answer. Okay. Okay. Sorry. It does block on the phone. Okay, so we've finished question one, I think, slowly. Everybody has been trying to make an effort out of principle or out of fear for their annual heating bill, whatever source of heating it is. And one person has decided that they don't care, and après nous le déluge, whether that's financial or environmental. But this confirms that this is an urgent policy issue for EU policymakers. I mean, people are concerned about this. Yeah. Well, I guess those are the ones that are not so warmly dressed here that I used to. But yeah, okay, there we go. So the next one is, do you know actually the energy performance of your house or apartment, whether you own it or whether you rent it? Next time you buy a house or you rent a house, you will see the mandatory energy performance certificate. So you should know it. Lots of people don't know it. If you don't know it, it is probably worse than you think. I said, out of experience of house hunting over the last years, if they don't give it to you, then it's usually a G. So that's right. An important notion, of course, is that we have a lot of people here in Brussels, and Brussels has quite tight energy classes compared to Flanders and Wallonia and to other member states. This is apparently a big issue in the negotiations in the parliament as well, to try and harmonize these indicators. But there are 5 people that are living in future-proof houses that will not be subject to a mandatory renovation requirement soon, I think. And then the next one, this is more only for owners really, but what is stopping you from renovating your house? Yeah. Other reasons, well, that might be renting. I'm not owning a place, so I cannot renovate it. The same 5 people that were living in super isolated houses say they already have renovated it. The cost is coming up now. Could be that.
Could be the
Yeah. Co-ownership structures can be very complicated when it comes to renovation issues. That's absolutely true. Also on the production side, and putting down solar panels, etc. Okay. Well, this is maybe more of a test to see if you've paid attention. And, how many steps can you undertake to still be cost and energy effective? How many steps can you do a renovation for it to be still reasonably cost and energy effective? The number of steps you do in a renovation plays a role in the end result. The more steps you do, the harder it becomes to achieve the same end result. Okay, and there we go, the last one. It's a bit of a self-explanatory question, of course. Do you feel that the banking sector should be involved in financing the renovation of the EU building stock, maybe with a focus on residential buildings, in a mandatory or voluntary way? To the very biased sample set, I think. But you can take this to the trial out. Don't take the results. Exactly. So 13, so yeah, 14, so yeah, so 18. So more than 80% of citizens think that there should be yes. Okay. Do we have any questions in the audience from over here? Yeah, go ahead. Anaïs, do we have the mic there? I thought people could just fill it in.
Yes, I do have a question.
Yeah.
It's I was pretty surprised that you didn't mention the energy performance contracts, which is to me an interesting scheme to make people jump the barrier and do actually renovate their home. So why not this scheme? And several of you propose different stuff and not this one. Why?
Yeah, I think that comes back to the one of the tools in the toolbox discussion. Do we want to take another question, the audience, or saw you nodding, Stan? I think you want to.
Certainly, I mentioned it because I said we are not limited to mortgage and loans when we speak about financing renovation. We speak about private financing, and from our side, energy performance contracts work really well when we speak about non-residential buildings, because there is the basic assumption is that you need to be able to meter and certify energy savings. Sometimes we are exploring in the Commission with many projects the possibility to deploy it with the large housing association or social housing, where something like this can be done, especially on social housing where there is no real where the inhabitants are not owners of the house. But it is true that when we move to residential, the idea of deploy the methods and certified savings, it become more difficult for a number of issues. Not the last one, the main one also is privacy concerns. But there is a whole there is some development in that regard. I mean, pay for performance. There is a number of financing schemes that are looking on how we can really address, because this is probably, I think one of the other in the panels mentioned the need to have how to link of course the repayment of the loan to the savings, and this is one of energy performance contracting is one of the only way actually on how to do it, because you have certainty on how much you have saved every month. But I mean, I think it's an interesting. Please go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it works on aggregate for big projects, But for individual homes, there's always a risk that the energy savings actually does not exactly match what you calculated. And then it's a factor of uncertainty, I think, for consumers to make sure that it works. But I would say that nevertheless, I think, you know, any financing that operate through energy performance contract, I think for us, those financing tools should also be made eligible to a lower rate by ECB. So I think they should also be encouraged. But I'm not sure this exactly matches the needs of the individual homeowner in the same way. But maybe I'm not an expert on this type of contract either. So.
Your first counter argument, I can't agree. It creates, I agree, a risk for the ESCO that he will not get the savings, but since he will be doing it for a portfolio of thousands, it will be average. So it will be smoothed and the risk should be controlled. So I cannot see the limit in that case.
Yeah, no, so that's what I said. It works in aggregate.
Yeah, so it will work.
If the companies are willing to take the risk.
Yeah, if they scale it up. Yeah, if there is a scale, yes.
You wanted to react on this? Or?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I mean, that's a bit the same which we have with many different instruments, that there is a lot of potential. I mean, also the on-bill schemes, it's something which we strongly support. But sometimes you have legal hurdles as well. I mean, for the on-bill schemes, it's I think something where you have a challenge of like a third party with energy company, etc., being involved. So some national administrative or legal framework doesn't allow also to put in place these innovative financial instruments. So that's another hurdle which we need to overcome. We see that also a lot in renewable energy, where you have a lot of permits needed for all sorts of things. I think for the building permits, it's a bit the same. So yeah, that's another component for the struggle.
But there actually, if I understand correctly, the European Union is issuing instructions to member states to simplify some of those procedures and overrule them.
Yeah.
So
No, I mean we are getting there,
side,
but there's a lot of promises in the Fit for 55.
Yeah, exactly. Not a question, Nicola.
Yeah. So the question is not about energy efficiency, it's more about sustainable energy for households. So there's this kind of revolution almost ongoing, I have the feeling, in terms of solar panels building on rooftops and balconies. In Germany, at least, is really skyrocketing. There are like a few companies which are really growing in fast pace. However, the limits and barriers are, on the other hand, still super huge and are limiting actually that this scales up even much more. So I was just wondering, I'm very blunt on the topic. I just know because a few friends work in the field, and I'm wondering whether there's on European level an attempt to facilitate the deployment of private renewable energy solar panels. Yeah, so I don't know whether someone has any insights on this.
Very specific topic. Maybe take a second point from Seb.
Just something. I think the Commission itself tabled through Repower EU tabled amendments to EPBD to make installation of PV panels mandatory on rooftop for new buildings and for buildings with large renovations above a certain number, a certain size, etc. There might be a few exceptions on a few buildings, whatever. But it's normally becoming mandatory. Question is, why is it becoming mandatory so late and not 20 years ago, in my view? I think, well, you need to discuss, to see the thresholds, because indeed, I'm not sure it's for any individual building.
It's also different.
Probably there are different thresholds.
But okay.
Perhaps.
To comment on that briefly.
Yeah.
Aware of
and I can reply briefly. Indeed, two elements. With the Repower EU amendment, you know that after the Fit for 55, with the invasion of Russia to Ukraine, the Commission have come up with this plan to phase out the EU dependence from Russia. And there was an amendment to the three directives, to the energy efficiency directive, to the renewable directive, and to the PPD. The amendment of the PPD exactly addressed the need to how it is structured now. Allow me, I mean, I don't really remember the date, but there is some deadline for non-residential, so commercial and public, and some deadline for residential, but residential with a surface, roof surface of a certain area. But indeed, they issued the legislation that is coming, that is being discussed, would indeed have as an obligation that if you are in a building or if you are undergoing a renovation and you can be qualified, you should have allowed the deployment of PV panel. Then it's still a commercial decision but at this moment is like the business case for PV panel is quite strong, but it's still a commercial decision to decide to deploy them by private owner. But it should be allowed. I would add another element, I mean, to your question, in the sense that, you know, when we speak about energy renovation, we address both elements, both energy efficiency and renewables in building. This because in many cases, especially, they go hand in hand in the sense that you need to insulate your building in order to be ready for low-grade renewable deployment. This is, for example, the classical case for heat pumps. Like if the buildings is not of a sufficient good level, at least in Northern Europe, then I mean in Southern Europe maybe you don't need the same level of heating. You will not be able to deploy an heat pump or to deploy that renewable solution. So they need to go hand in hand. They are not opposed to us.
Thanks.
If I may add to this, so we have these very, of course, structural political targets, but what we do on a bit more concrete way is at BEUC we have a project on collective purchasing of solar panels, but also heat pumps. And there, the idea is that consumer organizations, and that's our members, helping individual consumers to get the project done from A to Z. So you have, first of all, the testing of the different installations so that you get the best solar panel on the market. And then you have the contact with the certified installer and all this. So we are getting this running right now. It's called ClearX.
Okay. Maybe one more question from the audience again. Yeah, go ahead.
If you don't mind. I come from a behavioral economics background, so to understand why people don't go into that kind of investments when they provide long-term benefits but upfront cost. The real problem is the upfront cost. We have a super strong preference for present, which is very well known by academics. So the scheme I was pushing forward, the energy performance contracts, remove the upfront cost, which is a good thing, but it's not enough. We still need to do more because we need to attract people to do it. And even if you remove the upfront financial cost, there is still an upfront burden. There will be people in your home doing the renovation for 1 month, and perhaps you will have to 6 months. You will have to live by your friends, which is a super high burden. So we need to find a way to provide an upfront benefit. So I think there should be an upfront check at some point. So that will attract people to get the check. Otherwise, we only have the upfront burden. And who wants to have a 6-month burden?
Yeah, I think part of that burden is not just you cannot avoid moving out of the property if you do a deep renovation often. But part of the solution could be something on the administrative side to at least try and smooth that burden, which is something that Anna has mentioned, the famous one-stop shops. Maybe that's something you want to explain again more, how you can at least take out all the other barriers which I mentioned here as well. Only a few people voted for it, but I personally feel that is a complicated one, which is the finding the right suppliers, getting the technical complexity, getting maybe an architect in if it's very complex. This is also holding people back, I think, and you can smooth this out with non-financial measures. Huh?
Yes, exactly. And I mean, it's basically also bringing all the actors together. That's why it's called a one-stop shop. It's where all come together. So have one expert who is accompanying you as a consumer in the whole process, but he brings in also the certified installers, because of course he or she knows who is good for this type of work. I mean, you are not trying to find on the internet as a consumer someone who is doing that. How do you make this selection? I mean, you need to find the right person. Otherwise, I mean, you also get really can get really into trouble to get a bad work, a bad renovation work. So you really need somebody who brings you the person whom you can trust, that you get a good quality of work. This one-stop shop is also to bring in the financial instruments, explaining you what is the right financial instrument in your situation. So this is really the idea, to bring everyone together in one place. And we have these kind of one-stop shops already in some countries. I know that in Germany, our German member is doing some of them, but we need to have them broadly available in Europe.
Before I bring you back in, maybe I think you didn't get exactly the answer you were waiting for. So the gentlemen here are willing to come in, maybe also on the economic, on the discount rate that people intuitively apply to these kind of investment, because I think that's where the link is between the psychology and the economics.
Yes, I mean, I think you hit a key issue. Like in the end of the day, I mean, we often speak about financial, technical barrier, but there is a behavioral aspect that is very strong, and on which we should also, I mean, we can increase the technology, and one aspect of which we focus, for example, through our Horizon Europe projects, etc., is industrialized deep renovation. So to make it quicker, faster, and cheaper to renovate your house on a deep way, there is a number of projects. You might know Energy Strong, for example, which is active in Netherlands and in France. But this is a key issue, like how long it will take me, how long I have to stay out of my house, what will be the hassles, etc. In terms of upfront cost, I mean, everything that is being done is indeed to try to de-risk, but it's true that the subsidies arrive later, but there is also a need to check that all the documentation is in place, and that what you have committed to achieve is indeed certified, because I mean, that is the whole point. I mean, you cannot give a free check if you didn't have expert coming to your home and certifying that you are achieving a sufficient level of renovation that could justify providing public budget to subsidize it, because there is also still a lot out there that is not sufficiently ambitious, and is still when we speak about cost efficiency of public budget, it's not only about mobilizing investment, but also at financing both renovation that are sufficient ambition, and the people that really need to get the finance, and not maybe what is often happen to finance anybody. On one-stop shop, there is many experience, but I mean, they're all over Europe. It's true that they need to be scaled up. Sometimes they are left in the hand of organization or public, of regional and local authorities. But yeah, I know that we are in the new legislation. We are really looking into scaling that up. Stan, we wanted to comment on the.
Yeah, I mean, just to say, it's very good. It's an interesting question and important one. I think there's a missed opportunity every time people sell the house, like before selling, or when, before the next occupier. Yeah, but I think it's not, the problem is not that easy. So in practice, that was my first train of thought when I started investigating what banks could do, like get the renovation done by the new owner when you buy, or by the seller, because then you're not occupying the house anyway during this period. Actually, it's not that easy, because for behavioral reason, people want first to get the new house and they want to move in, and they really, most of them, people don't want to invest in big renovation, changing the house before they live in it. There's a saying like you should live in 4 seasons in a place before you know it, and before you know what changes you want to make. So it's actually not easy. And the actual problem then is people get a mortgage for the new house, and then they haven't calculated the cost of the. So actually, there's an argument for pushing sellers to renovate before they sell. But then the other issue is the person selling the house, doesn't care about the performance at the end. At least not for themselves. They care if there's a strong check, and so I think this is where the debate on minimum energy performance standards come in as well, because if at the end of the day there will be penalties if you do not renovate it before you sell, and so on. So all these things. So I think that we are not yet touched really the bottom of this problem. I think there are still incentives to be designed, so yes, good point that we need to reflect more on this.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
one more
go ahead.
question, if there's time. In the context of these other incentives, I was wondering, because I do have the experience not of, unfortunately, my own house, but helping in the process of renovating my parents' house, actually apartment building, because I was working a bit in real estate and helping them out get also the EU support for that, and in the end it was a quite successful project. But the one thing that did come up, which is a kind of limitation in the support, which on the one hand is reasonable, but is a bit disincentivizing, is one big actual incentive for anyone renovating their house, especially if it's a bigger project, apartment building, for example. Then it's also to have, you know, a kind of newer, nicer house, from also the aesthetics and etc. Not only because for the owner, it's not only the environmental impact. And then we were, you know, having to on just simple things like getting also the making sure that everything is co-funded. You really had to go in there. Okay, the windows in the can be changed outside, and the lights in the corridors can be changed, but painting the corridors and redoing it, redoing the kind of facade of the corridors, which is more aesthetic, which was very important to all the people, but not really under the incentive. So can there be a better kind of balance there, that a flexibility that provides an extra incentive, that because for the person it's, yeah, unless they're super sustainability conscious, the main reason for renovating is that you have a nicer renovated house that has a higher market value, and the market value is not only determined by the energy marking.
Just looking at the panel, Mathilde, maybe, or no?
I just wanted to say that we've been talking about one-stop shops, which have a key role to play, but also about individual certified renovation experts, because for the moment we can't trust them. They're, like you said, you know, they're doing the corridor, but they don't really know what to focus on. So we need to scale up one-stop shops, but accredited renovation experts as well.
Okay, yeah, I think.
No, yeah. I think the irreversible loans can be big. I also know in France, the expense is eco-PTZ, which I think I know. I was speaking to the team, actually, they said the most effective, the most attractive type of loan they make are those when people buy a house and renovate, and then they don't have strict conditions about what is included in the loan. So I think that's really the point, that this renovation, people should be eligible for this loan as long as they reduce energy consumption by 60%. And then they want to also change the color of the window, and yes, they should be able to do that. But and the key point here is that this is from a cost-effective use of public money. Well, this is feasible with bank loans because people cannot pay for their decoration. But of course, using grants for allowing people to do that is a bit more tricky. So I think this is another argument for why we should have better, more flexible use of subsidized loans, but there are still loans that people need to repay, so it's not like a free check. Yeah.
Thanks, Don. I'm afraid we have to end it there. I know there were a few more questions in the audience. I want to give a last opportunity to the panel to provide any sort of concluding remarks that you would want to make. I personally think we've learned a lot about the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive and the different tools in the toolbox, as I like to call them. But there's also still a lot of work out there that goes far beyond the forthcoming trialogue on this specific piece of legislation. So maybe with that, we're going to reverse order, and if you want to add anything, Pierluca, and now is the time.
No, I think there is a lot of on the plate. I mean, we are following now. We are here now because we are discussing about. I mean, it's a hot topic, as you know, and there is the interinstitutional negotiation, the revision of the PPD, but we will come as we have come before, to the implementation. And I mean, to the implementation is a long period. It entails the transposition of the obligation that will come and the development of the supporting financing mechanism at member state level. And I hope that the same interest that we have in this period for the BPD will be followed up also in the implementation, because there is key, the moment is key where many of the aspects that we have raised on the accessibility of the type of schemes, on how the scheme is designed to really meet the needs, is indeed where they will be addressed. Because in the end of the day, when we are speaking about financing measures, the directive gives some indication, but then it's the regulation of the, be it an EU financing measures or be it a national financing measure, is the specific regulation of the fund that will detail how this will be implemented. So, I mean, I just wanted to conclude on that, I mean, let's see what will come out of the negotiation, and let's look also forward to the real implementation of all of this, because this will be a key aspect.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief because I think I've spoken a lot during the Q&A, but just to reiterate, we have a campaign going on with 20 partners from France, Spain. We want to look for more countries. I think this campaign is really nice because we are matching people with expertise on finance, but also innovation, consumer side. So I think there's really a place for many stakeholders. And you know, our next step will certainly be to continue monitoring the trilogue, but also then improve the transposition of the directive into national law, because ultimately, you know, it's only a directive, and member states can do more than what the directive says. And we look forward to continue the dialogue between financial regulators, banks, and the Commission on this mortgage proposal standard. And I think there are many other ways that we can get banks to also this transition plan, for example, that could be also another avenue for pushing the same goal as MPS, but perhaps in another channel. So we need to continue conversation.
Or maybe the mortgage credit directive, which we discuss in the end. Mathilde, concluding remarks.
To conclude, I think it was so to conclude, I think it was clear that renovation is no simple task, but it's an essential one. And as we saw, we have not one silver bullet instrument. We will have to use different instruments depending on the different consumers and their situation. But mobilizing the private sector through mandatory MPS and well-targeting public funding is a good start.
Yes, and I would say building up on this, given that we don't have a silver bullet, we really need a lending zone for the EPBD, which looks very close to what we now have in the EP compromise proposal. Because if we enter in a situation where we say, yes, then you get the MPS, but we don't get the green loans, we will have a renovation wave which will be done halfway, but not the full way.